The air in First Union Bank was sharp with the scent of polished marble and stale ambition. I stood at the threshold, my navy blazer crisp, my heels silent against the tiled floor. In my left hand, a leather folder held the paperwork for $7. Billy Merger, my merger, the one I clawed my way to secure as CFO of Horizon Innovations. In my right, my ID, a small plastic rectangle that should have been my key to respect. But as the glass doors hissed shut behind me, I felt the weight of every eye in the room. Not curious, not welcoming, suspicious. I was Emma Carter, and I'd walked into this bank 100 times before. But today, something was different. The air felt heavier, like the prelude to a storm you can't see but know is coming. My brother, Daniel, stood behind the teller counter, his maroon tie as faded as his promises. He didn't look up, not yet. His fingers danced over the keyboard, each tap a deliberate act of ignoring me. I adjusted my grip on the folder, my pulse. Steady, but my chest tight, like a fist was closing around my ribs. The line was short 2 people ahead. An older man in a tweed jacket and a woman clutching a check like it was her lifeline. The teller, a young guy with a nervous smile, waved me forward. "Next," he called, his voice flat. I stepped up, my heels clicking softly, and slid the folder across the counter. "Certified wire transfer," I said, my tone even. "Details." On the second page, he didn't touch the folder. Instead, he glanced at my ID, then at Daniel, who was now watching from behind the glass partition. His eyes narrowed, not at the paperwork, but at me. "Name doesn't match the face," Daniel muttered, loud enough for the room to hear. His voice carried that old, familiar sting, the one he'd used since we were kids, when he tossed my sketches in the trash and called them doodles. The teller beside him shifted, avoiding my gaze. I didn't flinch. "The forms are notarized," I said, my voice low but firm. "My name's on the account." Daniel leaned forward, his lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Emma, you're not with them." He picked up my ID with 2 fingers like I was contaminated and let it drop. It hit the marble floor with a dull clatter, skidding to a stop near my heel. The room went quiet. Not the soft hum of a bank lobby, something sharper, like the silence before a guillotine falls. "Pick it up," he said, not meeting my eyes. And get out. I didn't move, not yet. The weight of the moment pressed against me, but I let it stretch, let it burn. Every eye in the bank was on me, now the tellers, the customers, the woman in pearls at the front desk who'd stopped. Typing on her iPad. I could feel their stares, some curious, some embarrassed, none brave enough to speak. My brother in my own blood had just thrown my identity to the floor like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. I knelt slowly, my fingers brushing the cold marble. As I picked up the ID, I stood, brushed it against my sleeve, and slid it back into my pocket. "I'm here for a certified wire transfer," I repeated, my voice steady as granite. Inside, though, something was cracking, not my resolve, but the last thread of hope I'd held for Daniel. For family, he didn't respond. Instead, he flicked. His wrist, signaling to someone behind me. Footsteps approached, firm and unhurried. A security guard, his hand resting near the walkie-talkie on his belt, stepped into view. "Ma'am," he said, his tone polite but final. "We're going to need you to leave." I turned. Not to the guard, but to Daniel. Our eyes locked. His jaw twitched just for a second, and I saw it, the flicker of shame he'd never admit. I didn't plead, I didn't argue. I just let my silence wrap around him, heavy and undeniable. Let it sit there like a truth he couldn't unsee. He blinked first. The manager emerged from a side hallway, his suit slightly too tight, his smile practiced but thin. "Miss," he said, his voice coated in false kindness. "Could we step into a private room for some documentation clarification?" Clarification. The word tasted like ash. I nodded, gathered my folder, and followed him past the teller line. Daniel didn't look up. The private room was small, the air cold from a hissing vent overhead. A woman sat inside, Mid-30s, headset on, laptop open. She didn't acknowledge me as I entered. The manager offered another vague smile and slipped. Ouch, shutting the door with a soft click. I'm Sarah, the woman said, finally looking up. Her fingers tapped rhythmically on the keyboard, casual, like she was playing a game. We need to verify the origin of your documents and your relationship to the account. My name's on the account, I said, keeping my voice level. The form is notarized and the authorization code is on page 3. She didn't look at the folder. I'm sure, she said, her tone light but edged with doubt. We've had a spike in impersonation scams lately, especially ones involving corporate stationery. She gestured at my folder like it was evidence of a crime. Just confirming you didn't borrow this name or exaggerate your position. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, really looked, letting the weight of her words settle. I'd seen that expression before on Daniel's face when I pitched my first startup idea, on my mother's when I said I'd climb the corporate ladder without their help. Polite doubt, wrapped in a smile. You're very calm, Sarah said, tilting her head. Most people get nervous when we ask about forged credentials. I opened the folder, slid the transfer form across the table. You're welcome to contact my general counsel if that helps. My voice was soft, but it carried. Then I reached into my blazer and pulled out my badge. Not a lanyard, not a flimsy card, a heavy, engraved metal plate. Emma Carter, Chief Financial Officer, Horizon. Innovations. The room shifted. Sarah's fingers froze above her keyboard. Her eyes flicked from the badge to me, then back again. The color drained from her face. Oh my God, she murmured. I gave a small nod, letting the silence do the rest. She typed something quickly, her hands trembling now. The manager reappeared, his smile gone. I wasn't aware we were working with Horizon directly today, he stammered, his eyes darting to the badge. I didn't announce it, I said, slipping the badge back into my pocket. I gathered my folder and ID, my movements deliberate. The manager stepped aside as I reached the door. Sarah half stood, her voice catching. Wait, where are you going? I paused in the doorway, turning just enough to meet her eyes. You've seen enough. The lobby was a different world now. The silence wasn't just quiet, it was the kind that follows a detonation. Conversations stopped. Phones went still. Even the air conditioning seemed to hold its breath. I walked the same path I'd taken in, my steps measured, my head high. No one dared look past me now. They saw me, some with wide eyes, some pretending they hadn't judged me 5 minutes ago. Daniel stood frozen behind the counter, his face pale. Emma, he said, his voice low, almost a plea. Please don't do this here. I stopped, not because I wanted to hear him out, but because I wanted him to feel the weight of his own words. He thought this was about a scene. He thought I'd stay quiet, like always. Like when he borrowed my ideas in college, or when he left me out of family photos, nudging me to the edge until I was barely there. He bet on my silence and he bet wrong. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone and dialed. Lucas, I said, my voice clear but not loud. Freeze the deal, all of it. Indefinitely. Daniel's eyes widened. He reached for the envelope he'd brought in earlier, the one he'd waved like a trophy, as if hiding it now could undo what he'd started. The line clicked. Understood, Lucas said, his voice clipped. I hung up, setting the phone on. The counter, right on top of Daniel's envelope, a whisper rippled through the room. Did she just say freeze? A woman near the ATM muttered. As in the $7 billion deal? The air crackled with disbelief, like static before a storm. Daniel looked like he'd been punched, his hands gripping the counter to steady himself. I didn't gloat, I didn't need to. I slid the signed paperwork next to his envelope proof of what was and what wouldn't be and turned to leave Dot as I walked out. The young teller who dropped my ID stared at the floor, her hand frozen on her mouse. It paused just for a moment, letting her feel the weight of her mistake. Then I stepped into the sunlight, the glass doors hissing shut behind me. The sidewalk. was warm under my feet, the summer heat pressing against my skin. I leaned against a lamppost, my breath uneven for the first time. A single tear slipped down my cheek, uninvited. Not anger, not sadness release. I'd carried Daniel's betrayals. For so long, I'd forgotten they weren't mine to hold. I didn't notice her at first. Across the street, a woman stood under a cafe awning, notebook in hand, press badge clipped to her coat. Claire Holt, journalist. Her eyes met mine, hesitant but sharp. She'd seen everything. "Emma," she said, crossing the street, her voice soft but steady. "I wasn't filming, but I was watching." I nodded, my hands still in my pockets. She gestured to a cafe table. "Can we sit?" I hesitated, then sat. The metal chair was warm, the table streaked with condensation from forgotten drinks. Claire flipped open her notebook, but didn't. "Right, you have the power to destroy them," she said, her words honest, not sensational. "What happened in there? It's bigger than a family fight." I looked at the glass of water on the table, untouched. "You think I want revenge?" She didn't answer right away. "What do you want?" "I want to be left out of it," I said. No names, no headlines, just the truth, quietly. "Claire's?" Brow lifted, but she nodded. "I can do that." We sat in silence for a moment, the kind that doesn't beg for words. She understood. Not every story needs a megaphone. Sometimes the sharpest truths cut cleanest in whispers. I drove home, the city blurring past my windows. My phone buzzed relentlessly, colleagues, ex-colleagues, a random acquaintance from a conference years ago. I ignored them all. The porch light flicked on as I pulled into my driveway, casting my shadow across the stone path. Inside, the house was still, the kind of quiet that feels like it's waiting for something. I set my bag down, the glow of my phone lighting up the leather. 6 messages, 3 missed calls. One subject line read, "Is this you?" Another, that was legendary. I poured a glass of water, the metallic taste grounding me. Then I opened a link from an unknown sender, Claire's article. No photo, just her name and a title. The silent walkout that stopped $7 billion. No names, no specifics, but the truth was there, the teller's doubt, the gloss partition, the rejection of a $1 billion deal without a shout. My badge wasn't mentioned, but the line about a mid-Atlantic executive was clear to anyone in my world. I closed the laptop, the dark settling around me. LinkedIn was already ablaze, hundreds of shares, comments guessing at the banker who'd walked away from billions. Name her, she deserves a statue. I turned off my phone. The world didn't need my name yet. Then it rang. "Phil, my old partner, you okay?" He asked, his voice soft, no agenda. I didn't ask for this. "To go public," I said. "I know," he said. "You don't owe anyone an explanation, but I'm here." I closed my eyes, letting his words sink in. Not all men in power fail you. The next morning, I woke to headlights cutting through my curtains. A black sedan idled at my gate. Engine. Low, deliberate. My heart ticked faster. I pressed the intercom, my voice steady. "Yes?" "Miss Carter, I'm Mark Reynolds, U.S. Treasury Department," came the reply, calm but firm. "I'm here about Daniel Carter." I buzzed him in, meeting him on the porch. His gray suit was sharp, his badge gleaming in the dawn light. "We're investigating your brother for laundering $3 million, he said, flipping open a folder. "Your name came up." Not as a suspect, as someone with integrity. I stayed silent, my arms crossed. He showed me surveillance footage, Daniel passing a bundle to a teller, too discreet to be innocent. "We'd like a statement," Reynolds said. "Your name carries weight. One night," I said. He nodded and left. I sat on the porch, the dew soaking my jeans. My phone buzzed. A voicemail from Daniel. "You destroyed me," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Why would you do this to your own blood?" I didn't listen to the rest. Not yet. The sky turned orange, and I knew nothing would be quiet again. The black sedan's taillights faded into the dawn. leaving a trail of gravel dust that hung in the air like an unanswered question. I stood on my porch, the damp cushions soaking. Into my jeans, Mark Reynolds' words echoing in my head. Your brother is under investigation for laundering $3 million. My phone buzzed again in my hand, Daniel's voicemail still unplayed beyond his first cracked words. I didn't want to hear the rest, not yet. The morning was too quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like it's holding its breath before the world cracks open. I went inside, the door's latch clicking louder than it should, like a gavel striking. The kitchen was dark except for the faint glow of my phone on the counter. I poured another glass of water, the metallic taste sharper now, grounding me as I stared at the screen. Daniel's name sat there, heavy, accusing. I tapped play, bracing myself. I didn't mean to hurt you. He began, his voice soft, almost pleading. I swear, Emma, I was under pressure, always passed over. I had to prove I was worth something. A pause, then quieter. I used your name? That $4 million loan in 2022 I borrowed against your biotech merger. They wouldn't give it to me as Daniel, but as Emma Carter, doors opened. The line went dead. I set the glass down, my hands steady but my chest burning. He'd forged my name, my legacy, the merger I bled for, the one that put Horizon Innovations on the map. I walked to the hallway closet, my steps automatic, and pulled out the old metal lockbox. My fingers fumbled with the key, the hinges creaking as I opened it. Inside were contracts, award letters, and there, buried under a stack of Hill Pond Bank archives, the 2022 authorization forms. My name typed neatly at the top, but the signature close, but not mine. The M didn't loop right. The ink was black, not my blue. Sloppy, but just good enough to fool someone who didn't care to look twice. I sink onto the couch, the papers in my lap. A memory flickered Christmas 2023. My parents' dining room, the smell of overcooked turkey and cheap wine. Daniel had bragged about a big bank project, winking as he mentioned a senior partner's sign-off. My mother had smiled, too gentle, and said, "You've got so much, Emma. Let him have the spotlight." My father nodded. Shared success, right? I'd laughed it off then, chalked it up to family quirks. But now, staring at the forged signature, I saw it. They'd known. They'd let him steal from me, rationalized it as family loyalty. My skin felt too tight, like it didn't fit anymore. I closed the lockbox, locked it away, and sat there staring at the wall. The quiet was deafening, but it wasn't peace. It was the calm before a reckoning by noon. My phone was a war zone. Messages piled up, colleagues, ex-colleagues, a stranger from a long-forgotten conference. Is this about you? That was legendary. Claire's article had spread like wildfire, shared across LinkedIn, Twitter, Reddit. No names, just the story of a mid-Atlantic executive who stopped a $7 billion deal with a single call. The hashtags were already forming. Hashtag the walkout. Hashtag BankerX. Hashtag Dia said no. I turned off my phone, but the world kept buzzing. I drove to the office, but halfway there, a dark sedan appeared in my rearview mirror, tailgating too close, its tinted windows hiding the driver. My pulse spiked. I tightened my grip on the wheel, leaving through downtown traffic, but it stayed with me, matching every turn. At a red light, I glanced back, still there, engine idling like a predator waiting to pounce. I floored it when the light turned, cutting through a side street. The sedan didn't follow, but my hands shook as I parked underground at Horizon's headquarters. The elevator to the top floor felt like a cage. When the doors opened, the front desk staff greeted me with a new look in their eyes, not pity. Not curiosity, but respect. Real respect. I nodded, forcing a smile, and walked to the boardroom. A new plaque gleamed beside the glass door, etched in brushed metal. Justice, not just revenue. Dedicated to Emma Carter. Because integrity is not optional. I stared at it, my throat tight. It wasn't triumph, it was acknowledgement. Heavy and hard -1 inside. The team stood as I entered. "Please don't," I said, waving them down. I wasn't a queen or a judge, just a woman trying to breathe right again. We talked Q3 projections, the South Africa deal, numbers that felt distant compared to the storm in my head. Someone asked, hesitantly, "Do you regret it?" I leaned back, letting the question hang. "You don't regret cleaning a wound," I said finally. "It just stings while it heals." They nodded, some relieved, others thoughtful. The meeting ended and I returned to my office, where a small envelope waited on my desk. No postmark, just my name and my father's careful script. I sat, staring at it before opening it. "He was your brother and we failed you both. I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know I see it now. No signature." I folded it, slid it into my drawer, and closed it. I didn't hate him, but I wasn't going back to that house. Not ever. That afternoon, I needed air. I left the office, turned off my phone, and drove to a park in the city's West End, a hidden spot Grandma used to take me to. The swings were still there, rusted but standing, and I could almost hear her humming Billie Holiday, her wide-brimmed hat shielding us from the sun. "Stay tall, baby," she'd said, brushing a bee off my knee. I sat on our old bench, tracing the carved initials EC+GM, barely visible now under new scratches. A shadow fell across the bench. I looked up, and a man stood there, mid-40s, in a cheap jacket, his eyes too sharp for a casual stroll. "Emma Carter?" he asked, his voice low. My stomach twisted. I nodded, slowly. "You need to retract your statement," he said, stepping closer. "People are asking questions they shouldn't." I stood, my bag clutched tight. "Who sent you?" He didn't answer, just stared, his hand twitching toward his pocket. I backed away, my heart pounding, and walked briskly to my car. He didn't follow, but his gaze burned into my back. I locked the doors, my breath shallow, and drove home, checking my mirrors the whole way. At home, the porch light flicked on, casting my shadow across the stone path. I locked the door behind me, double-checking the bolt. The house felt too still, like it was waiting for the next blow. My phone lit up with a new message, an anonymous email, the subject line blank. Inside, a single line. "Back off, or you'll regret it." I froze, my finger hovering over the delete button. Instead, I forwarded it to Lucas, my old partner, with a note. "This is escalating." He called immediately. "Emma, get a security system." "No," I didn't argue. By evening, a technician was installing cameras and a new alarm. But the unease lingered, a weight in my chest that no lock could ease. The next morning, I found a letter slipped under my door, no envelope, just a folded sheet. "You're tearing everything apart. Stop before it's too late." The handwriting wasn't Daniel's, but it was familiar, like something from my mother's. Stationary, I called Claire. "If it helps the bigger picture," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands, "use my name." She didn't speak for a moment. "You're sure?" "Yes." I hung up before she could say more. I sat on the porch, letting the breeze tangle my hair, the weight of my decision settling like a stone. Then my phone buzzed a voicemail from an unknown number. Daniel's voice, raw and broken. "You destroyed me, Emma. Why would you do this to your own blood?" I didn't listen to the rest. I stood, the morning sun warming my face, and drove to the office. But as I pulled out of my driveway, my car lurched, the steering sluggish. I stopped, heart racing, and checked the tires slashed, all four, the cuts clean and deliberate. I called a tow, my hands shaking as I scanned the street. No sedan, no stranger, just the quiet of a suburban morning dot by noon. Claire's updated article hit, my name in bold. Emma Carter, CFO, breaks silence on $7 billion deal. The internet. Exploded news networks ran clips of me leaving the courthouse with Reynolds. My face calm, the documents in my hands speaking louder than words. Colleagues texted apologies, some genuine, some laced with guilt. I should have listened. I was a coward. I let them pile up, unanswered dot at the office. The air was different. The team moved with purpose, their respect no longer new but earned. We discussed the South Africa deal, but my mind was elsewhere on the sloshed tires, the letter, the man at the park. During a break, I stepped into the parking garage, needing a moment alone. The lights flickered, then went out, plunging the space into darkness. My breath caught. Footsteps echoed, slow and deliberate, from the far end of the garage. I pressed against a pillar, my phone's flashlight shaking in my hand. "Who's there?" I called, my voice sharper than I meant. Silence. Then a car engine roared to life, headlights blinding me as it sped past, too close, the wind whipping my blazer. I stumbled back, my heart in my throat. When the lights flickered back, the garage was empty. That evening I sat at my kitchen counter, a mug of tea gone cold. My mother called, her voice soft, tearful. "You're tearing the family apart, Emma." I didn't move. "It didn't tear," I said. "It exposed." She cried. Real or not, I couldn't tell anymore. I let her sob, didn't comfort, didn't interrupt. When she stopped, I hung up. The silence that followed was clean, final. I opened my laptop, typed a statement. "I am ready to testify. You may attach my name." I sent it to Reynolds, then texted Claire. "Use my real quote. Start it with, 'I loved my family.' End it where you want." The next morning, the newspaper lay on my driveway. My face beneath the headline, "CFO breaks $7 billion silence and family." I carried it inside, set it on the counter, and let the quiet fill the space. I didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt, but because something heavier had settled in me. Resolve, I drove to the West End Park again, needing its quiet. As I sat on the bench, a woman approached an older colleague from years ago, her face lined with regret. "I believe them, Emma," she said. "I'm sorry." I nodded, letting her words pass through me. She left, and I traced the carved initials again. Grandma's voice in my head. "Stay tall." Back home, I turned on my laptop's camera, not for the world, but for me. "They used my name, my work, my silence," I said, my voice steady. "But they never owned my soul. They thought discarding me would break me, but I walked away. And still I rise." I press stop, tears falling, quiet and clean, like rain washing away years of dust. The lessons weren't loud, but they were sharp. Integrity isn't a trophy, it's a choice, made in the quiet moments when no one's watching. Family isn't a shield for betrayal. It's a bond that demands truth. Silence can be a weapon, not of weakness, but of strength, cutting deeper than any scream. And when you stand tall, even when the world tries to shrink you, you build a road. No one can take away. The tension lingered. Who sent the letter? Why did Daniel forge my name? What did my family hide? Would the stranger return? How would my testimony shake the bank? The questions hung like storm clouds, but I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. I'd walk through the fire and come out whole.